Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Review, this being a show where I talk about dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Family Law. Great series premiere, a lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, going into this show, for whatever weird reason, I'm sure if I went back and rewatched the trailer, it would be a lot more apparent. But I was under the impression Abigail wasn't a lawyer and then became a lawyer working for her dad. I don't know why I thought that. It's no, she is a lawyer. She's a disgraced lawyer that no one else wanted to work with her, so she had no choice but to work with her dad. And I'm curious, in his own way, was bringing her into, kind of pseudo the family business was simply for the fact that he'd be able to kind of make up in his own way because, maybe he's not the best at it. Because she even says, hey, wasn't kind of emotionally there for me for 30 years. So maybe this is his way to kind of extend an olive branch, but he just didn't know how do you make up for that large amount of abstinence? It's oh, cool. I'm going to have you work with your half siblings. And that ends up being this interesting, tumultuous relationship because obviously Daniel wanted nothing to do with her. Lucy's a little bit more on the amendable side in that regard, but obviously getting around Abigail, she didn't really respond too well to Abigail's personality, which I think they should cut her a little slack. Obviously, she's going to have a chip on her shoulder. There's so much unresolved issues with her dad that, is there, and it's even Lucy said oh, I think he figured things out by the time I came around. So probably even Daniel will admit he probably wasn't even the greatest dad then. So it's understandable why, and she'd be that's just part of her snappy personality, Abigail's. But I think it also doesn't help when you're up here talking and kind of praising your dad, oh, he's a good dad now. It's okay, that's good for you. Doesn't make up for him being a terrible father for me not really being there, That's also, this cast is obviously Victor Garber, Victor Garber, obviously I know from Legends of Tomorrow, CW wise, obviously here in the US. But Janelle Williams I know from Warehouse 13 and Bitten. And her Abigail's mom's played by Lauren Holly, which kind of took me by surprise. I was all right, oh, that's so interesting. Either way, putting all that aside, it's kind of an interesting thing with the Lauren Holly thing, just because I'm oh yeah, my head connects it to that episode of Leverage that she's in, where she kind of not, well, she doesn't really play a lawyer, but kind of it's kind of a whole law episode that she's involved in. So just her being part of a law show now. I mean, maybe she's had connections to law shows in the past. NCIS is the big thing I know Lauren Holly from. It was my first introduction to her, but either way, tangents and all that aside. But my point is, I think Daniel and Lucy don't give Abigail enough credit, which, don't get it wrong, she is a bit of a train wreck considering her circumstances. I mean, what got her disbarred, not even disbarred, well, borderline, I guess, disbarred, would have been her throwing up on her client and just kind of being super unprofessional. And I'm sure her client, we never really found out who that client was, but he must have been someone pretty big to probably it didn't look good upon her law firm, so they kind of let her go. So it wasn't a disbarment, more oh, you're fired and you're kind of blacklisted in the law department because no one's going to touch you with a 10-foot pole just because of yeah, you're kind of a mess. But she's going to AA, she's doing all the steps necessary, balancing out her family issues with her dad, the fact that she has this complicated relationship with her husband. I thought they were full-blown exes, but I guess they're separated but not divorced. I had to look into the actor who plays her hubby, because I'm he seems familiar and I just can't place what I know him from. Because when you initially meet him and she's talking about, well, you're the one that cheated on me, you're oh, he's a scumbag. But then you're going okay, so you figure there's more to it. It's basically, as he kind of describes it, yes, I made a mistake, but it's also a symptom of something bigger. Your drinking was already an issue, because him kicking her out of the house ended up leading to her drinking, and that's kind of what led to the whole beginning of the episode. But it's yeah, it seems her drinking was already an issue. There's something there that she hasn't properly dealt with, and alcohol ended up being her vice. And I don't think she quite sees it as an issue. It's just kind of okay, I'm doing this because it's the only way I can get back to my family. She has a good relationship with her son, but maybe because Sophia's a little older, she's a little more resentful towards her mom, because as it's the thing of, right, you're messing up our family. Like, this is all on you. Like, not really. She probably doesn't know the ins and outs about what their dad did wrong, but we also don't know what Abigail fully did wrong, because Abigail recognizes it's like, yeah, Sophia isn't the biggest fan of me because I'm the one that messed things up. But once again, like I said, it's just Abigail has this personality, and it's like, oh, it's not going to gel well because she is very sarcastic and she's very like says some very cutting things, because it's like, oh, how old were you when your mom died, Lucy? And Lucy's like, oh, 8. It's like, yeah. Well, he would have eventually left your mom too. I mean, if she hadn't died. And it's like, bitch, it's like, that was super uncalled for. But I think it's also because like she wanted to poke at you, because once again, that was after you made this whole statement about how, oh, he kind of learned from his mistakes when he had her, and kind of almost implying like he was a better father. I think that's why she felt the need to make that jab. But it's also to be like, yeah, Dad's a terrible person. He would have left your mom just like he left mine if she was still alive. But it's like, yeah, she didn't live long enough for him to just kind of bail on her like he bailed on my mom. So she did. I think when you look at like both of her parents, her mom and her dad, you could definitely tell Abigail's really like adopted aspects about each one of them. So, but obviously the main case that ends up popping up this episode was initially just kind of such a small thing. It was actually a favor where a little girl wanted to know about her biological dad, but her mom won't tell her about it. And it was initially something between her and Lucy, but obviously Abigail had to butt her head into it. And obviously, and I think that's going to be, the foundation of a lot of shows of this nature. You're going to bring a lot of your own respective situations into the courtroom with you. You just can't help it. Abigail in particular, because of this whole like, oh, she wants to know her father. It's like, right, a father she didn't know about. Her mom's kind of keeping it from her. And it's like, well, considering the relationship she has with her own father, understandable. But it's understandable why her mom, Jeanette, didn't want to tell her the story of like, because she's like, oh, yeah, there's a whole section of my family tree I know nothing about. It's like, well, that's because your mom ended up like it wasn't just a sperm donor. She actually got this situation off of Craigslist, and she didn't want any judgment for it. And it was a one-night stand, and she hasn't been able to find him since, because she only knew his name was Mark. He's in construction. Well, thanks to Abigail having quite the connection, she ended up having a guy who found the tattoo artist, because it's like, oh, he has like a tortoise tattoo somewhere that was very unique. And the guy paid him in trade or something like that. Instead of like paying him, it was like, oh, like he traded him some stuff. And it's like, cool. And she kind of does the same. It's like, cool, I can be your lawyer. I can give you at least an hour worth of free advice if you ever need it. And I'm curious, will that actually come up in the story later on? That particular tattoo guy, like getting advice from Abigail or not. But they found the guy. He owns a construction company. And once he found out he's a dad, he took off. But that's because he was like, right, I didn't realize I was a dad. 13 years, I was completely unaware I was a father. That was just kind of overwhelming to kind of get hit with that all at once. And he has a sit down, but the problem is, and yeah, him and his daughter hit it off, but the complicated thing is like, right, they're kind of overcompensating to some extent. Him and his current wife, Yvonne, have been trying to have a baby of their own, and it hasn't worked, but it's like her popping into their life now. It's kind of a miracle, but the problem is it puts Jeanette in this very third wheel position, because it's like, hey, he has all the money and I don't. Like, everything he can give our daughter, I can't. And now it's going to be like, all of a sudden, you swoop in after all these years of me doing everything I can to make ends meet. And the fact is that I don't have the bank account you have. I can't give her all the stuff that I would want to give her. And it kind of turns into like this favoritism thing of like, it's like, oh, like they're giving her all this shopping new clothes. The fact is they're going to give her own room. That it's like, right, it's just like, you get to swoop in and be the super awesome parent after 13 years when I've kind of had to struggle. And obviously Abigail brings her own thing into it. It's just kind of like, oh. And it's like, right, you want to see your kids. And she's like, oh, kid, singular. It's like, right, obviously, and at one point she was just like, don't stop me, I'm on a roll, like, work with me here. So the only reason why her dad was willing to take this case in the first place is because Abigail made it seem like, right, there's going to be a large compensation for us. He's worth a lot of money. The fact of the matter is we'll get like 33% of whatever amount of money she gets, which obviously Lucy was kind of against, but Daniel leaned more towards agreeing with like his they're half sisters. So Lucy was already kind of on the outs about this, and once again, secretly calling her sister a colossal bitch behind her back. And it's just like, once again, she's not the most empathetic person I can admit. Like, no, not Lucy, but Abigail. And because Lucy was trying, but you have to also be willing to look at things from her perspective, because it's like, who knows if she's ever had any interactions with her half siblings since then. Because the only person that actually in the office that is has a decent enough relationship with Abigail is Jerry. I love the whole thing. I'm like, oh my god, I haven't seen you since you were this. He's like, oh, last time I saw you had a beard, and Jerry's like, yeah. But it's like, she's willing to help Abigail, being like, right, you and your husband can work it out. Like, she's like, if my family situation, like me and my wife are celebrating 30 years of marriage, and it's like, yeah, I transitioned and we're still going strong. That it's like that, it's like, if our marriage can, continue to be strong after, those life changes, then, it's like, right, there's hope for you. And it's like, she's like, Jerry, I did miss you. Because it's like, yeah, she's the only one that has a decent enough relationship. Even her father's just kind of like, I'm taking you in just because you have nowhere else to go. Once again, like I said, I do think he's overcompensating for the fact is he has tried to extend an olive branch, but he just doesn't know how to make up for her. Still, he can come off like a dick in this episode. But Abigail does her thing in the courtroom. And side note, that judge, that was kind of a shitty thing of that judge to be like, hey, your father is well liked and loved, and he's willing to give you a second chance. So if you ever talk like that about your father in court again, I'll hold you in contempt. I was like, what kind of bull BS is that? Like, what? She's entitled to feel like, how you, like, it's almost making her feelings like dismissive. And it's like, it kind of sucks. It's just kind of like, cool. I guess because she's done so much in her life, her professional life as a lawyer, to stay away from like her father. But the fact is, like, I wonder how many people know that that's her dad. Like, does she avoid that? Does she always feel like on some level there's some part of me that got to where I am because of my... It's like, probably not. There's part of her like, no, I did everything on my own without my father's help. I was able to kind of manage and get to where I am. So she probably doesn't think like that at all. But I wonder how many people do know, like, who her dad... Because I'm like, I don't know if she necessarily said, like, oh, like, my dad, 30 years of my life. Like, so, like, I guess the people who are in the know, but not everyone generally knows that, like, she didn't. But I was like, that judge, I was like, that was shitty of you. Like, because once again, it felt like you weren't putting, like, who cares if he's well-liked? You could be well-liked and still be a shitty parent, you know? That's why I'm like... Because it's also because she's in that probational period. Because it's like, right, your father was willing to take a chance on you. It's like, yeah, well, I'm willing to take a chance on him after him not being around for 30. You know, you mean, like, that bothered me so much. I'm like, why are you, like, getting on her case? Like, who cares if he's well-liked, if he was kind of an absentee father? He was an absentee father. It's like, because I guess it's like, in the law world, it's like, your reputation means everything. And if that gets sullied by your own child, then that's the whole thing. I mean, I'm sure her circumstances 3 months ago didn't shine a light on him too fondly. So I don't know, man. I just thought that was kind of BS. But regardless of it all, things are swinging more towards Jeanette in this lawsuit type of thing of like, right, you owe basically nearly $500,000 in child support. And it's like, oh, you know, it's unconventional, and obviously his name kind of got dragged through the mud through the process, but her dad was actually happy. He's like, oh, good job. But then Lucy's like, cool, like, look at you. You were up there, like, feeling yourself and stuff like that. But at the same time, you're not even thinking about the people who are going to be caught up in this. Because, like, Jeanette and her daughter are in a very complicated spot because now it's like, oh, you're ruining everything, Mom. I hate you. Like, why do you want to wreck everything? And it's like... Once again, there is an altruistic side to this thing. It's not like Abigail came from it with a altruistic point of view. She came into this because she was projecting her own issues, especially with everything with her ex and her children. She was kind of projecting it on Jeanette, which there was still some truth to it, but she didn't enter this with the full altruistic nature of it. But sitting down with her ex and getting Mark and Jeanette to sit down too, they were able to come up with a deal that everyone could work with. You know, kind of a parenting plan, child support going forward, you know. But Abigail's dad was not too happy because it's like, cool, we were supposed to make like at least like hundreds of thousands of dollars on the back, or at least $100,000 or more, like on the back end of this. But now, like, oh, we making, because you only get like 33% of that or whatever, like a small percentage of all of that. So it's like, cool, now we only get like the price of a tuna sandwich. And she was sitting down with her siblings, and she was like, yeah, like, Dad's kind of a dick, right? And they like, well, I got this to do. Oh, I got this to do. So it's like, okay. So they just kind of leave her high and dry. And it's like, yeah, she might be not be your favorite person, but hopefully everything will get better, like, the more time they spend around each other. Because, like, once again, I don't know what their, like, have they ever had run-ins when they were younger? You know, and maybe that might be painting a lot of Abigail's interactions with her siblings. Or is this the first time that, like, they are aware of her, but it feels like they've just never been in the same circles. So maybe not. There's still obviously a lot to this family's history that we don't know, but it's like, yeah, she wanted this case, brought it to her dad, and kind of didn't basically deliver what they promised. I mean, yeah, they kind of, you know, but it's just, you know, she felt bad because of what Lucy said, and now, you know, the whole situation with Jeanette and her daughter just couldn't divorce herself from thinking about the fact is it made her think about, like, right, things between her and her own daughter, Sophia, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm doing it, you know, I'm kind of causing the same issues in this family, and I don't want to do that, so. But regardless of it all, I think it, you know, still ends nicely. Yeah, there's still some bumps in the road, but it's still all moving in the right direction because our ex was able to convince, well, I say ex, but it's like, right, the father of her children, we'll kind of just label him as that for now, to convince, because Nico, like, their son is like, all like, oh yeah, like, I want to hang out with you, Mom. But, like, Sophia was kind of dragged there, and she was just like, you know what, I'm going to go, like, work on homework or whatever. But, like, Abigail's mom was like, no, you're going to sit down because, like, you kind of when you get older, you'll finally realize, like, right, everyone screws up. Like, don't just kind of put it on your mom. Once again, it was like a combination of many different things. Yes, Abigail had her issues. Yeah, it might have been the bigger issues, but it's not like her dad walked away from this clean. So, and then maybe it's, you know, maybe she knows a thing or two about kind of screwing up, because it's probably like, right, she had to raise Abigail on her own, that it's like, yeah, because even Abigail was saying, even in court, it's like, yeah, at the very least, my dad could cut a check every once in a while, you know, for child support. At the very least, he wasn't in my life, but he could at the bare minimum do that, and that says a lot. Because it's like, right, you talking about Mark, knowing that, yeah, you knew she was trying to get pregnant, and you're like, oh, there was no financial obligations and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, but you never bothered to check in. And now all of a sudden, all these years later, because you do want children, now you find out, oh, you have one, you're kind of monopolizing her a little bit. Once again, not trying, it wasn't a situation of, no one's really the villain here. Like in Mark and Jeanette's case, it was just like, right, both of them trying to find, they ended up working towards an equilibrium at the end of it all. Like, no one's a douchebag in that situation. It was just like, I get it, he was just overcompensating because, like, right, I want to give you the world because I found out I have a daughter. But it's like, you kind of let Jeanette out in the cold, and it's like, right, after everything, it just feels like my daughter's being taken away from me. Like, cause she's going to want to, now all of a sudden want to be with you, like, every other week, when it's just been me and her. We've been a team for so long. So, like I said, it's just, no one's a dick in that regard. So, I think arguably the only people who come off looking like dicks in this situation is just Abigail, just because of the way things have been handled and the way she handled a lot of stuff and the way she talks to people, but also, like, her dad comes off a little bit like a dick. So, and I guess, like, her husband, because once again, they're not divorced. They are, I think, separated. She's trying to work towards going home. So, either way, kind of a nice introduction to the show. The trailer I watched was basically, once again, like, CW trailers usually are, like, only, like, the first 2 episodes. I'm saying that just because it's like, well, I know this is it's a Canadian show, very much like the Coroner situation of, it already aired in its entirety, the season, and now it's just like, the CW has the licensing rights for it here, at the very least in the US. Either way, I don't know too many, like, comedy drama law shows, and it seems like this kind of fits in that category. Like, the ones I can think of, I never saw it, but I want to say, like, the show Fairly Legal on USA that was short-lived with Sarah Shahi is one. Obviously, I think, like, Franklin and Bash, and obviously current She-Hulk. So it's like, yeah, I don't think those are like the only ones. I'm sure there are others, but those are the only ones that jump out to me to kind of have like that comedy drama law perspective on things. But yeah. Either way, I'm very excited to continue watching this show and see where things ultimately end up taking us going forward from here. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.